All right. List. All right. We are open.
Good morning, Alahwapa. Welcome.
Morning.
Lawapa, good morning.
Good morning.
Aloha bha.
Alahwapa.
Aloha, everybody.
Alahwapa.
Aloha bha, dear Priscilla.
Where are you? I don't see you.
I am in the bed. I am still in the bed.
Oh, no. Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Friends, before we get started, can I get some volunteers for this morning's devotional readings?
I have my, excuse me, my friends. She is a lady, Iranian lady from Florida, and she's here. She has a very good chanter.
Nice.
Nosrat John, please, can you please chant a Farsi prayer? Are you ready?
First of all, it hasn't started yet, and I need the names of 9 people who are going to participate this morning. And I'm not sure what Chris has already prepared. That would be lovely.
She asked me to chant, and I will chant when you tell me, when it's my time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, are you still there?
I haven't prepared any prepares in Farsi because I wouldn't understand them, but it's perfectly fine if we want to have someone do that.
Good. Nosrat, you will be second. I will call your name.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I need 7 more volunteers.
Hi, Hermione, it's Cordia. I'll do one.
Thank you, Cordia. How are you, dear heart?
I am well, thank you.
Aloha, Cordia. How are you?
Aloha, I'm doing much better. Thank you.
Good. Good to see. Good to hear you.
Hi, Cordia. God bless. Good to hear your voice.
Thank you.
Okay, I need 6 more volunteers to read. Elizabeth, morning. 5 more.
I can read, Miss Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. I need 4 more readers. Well, if we don't get any more readers, we can, the first 4 can do the last 4 readings, if you don't mind.
Just to be clear, we're going to have the Farsi prayer second, number 2 prayer?
Second.
Okay,
yes.
I will skip through that one. I'll just advance to the next slide after that.
Okay.
Because I mean, there are 9 set, but that's fine.
Right.
I can do it.
And
That's
I
fine.
know that they're numbered, which that helps too.
Okay.
Good morning, Iraj. Alakwafa, you're muted.
I hope you're well.
We are all well.
Good. Good.
Nosrat, would you be willing to read one of the prayers as well? It's not time yet. I would call your name. I just want to know if you're willing to do that. You are muted, so I don't know what you might be saying. All right. Cordia, would you mind reading twice?
I will read the prayer too if you like.
Yes, I'll read twice, Hermione.
Thank you, Cordia.
You're welcome.
Someone spoke. Who was that? And said that they were. Was that you?
Raj was just saying that if there are not enough people, I will also be glad to read a prayer, to say a prayer.
Great. Thank you, and I will call your name when it's time.
Okay.
And so then either Elizabeth or Barbara Taylor. Okay.
I read the prayer.
Thank you. That will be the last one.
I would read the prayer.
Oh, that would be wonderful, but we have 9 selections and we have all the readers now.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for volunteering.
Okay.
Well, friends, we're gonna go ahead and get started this morning. Welcome to the Baha'i Unity Center's Sunday devotional program. It's wonderful to have all of you with us again today. Thank you so much. You know, a little bit about the Baha'i faith. The teachings of the Baha'i faith brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, and whose name in Arabic means the glory of God. His teachings have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service with work performed in the spirit of service actually being accounted as worship in the eyes of God, the fundamental equality of the sexes, more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity, the harmony between religion and science as an established fact at its absolute core, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that strive to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. We have, once again, an amazing program planned for you today. We're pleased to have you join us. Again, welcome. We'll begin with the opening devotions, followed by some music from Matthew Taylor. If you have any electronic devices while you're speaking, please silence them now. Thank you. Dorothy.
I adjure thee by thy might, O my God. Let no harm beset me in times of tests, and in moments of heedlessness, guide my steps aright through thine inspiration. Thou art God. Potent art thou to do what thou desirest. No one can withstand thy will or thwart thy purpose. The Baha.
Thank you, Dorothy. Nusrat, your chant. Unmute.
Overload. Hudo Vando چگونه تو را شکر نماییم نمای تو نامتناهی است و شکرانه ما محدود چگونه محدود شکر غیر محدود نماید عاجزیم از شکر الطاف تو و به کمال عجز توجه به ملکوت تو می نماییم و طلب ازدیاد نعمت و عطای تو کنیم تویی دهنده و بخشنده و توانا عبدالبها عباس.
Thank you for that beautiful chant.
Thank you.
Cordia?
O ye men of wisdom among nations, shut your eyes to estrangement, then fix your gaze upon unity. Cleave tenaciously unto that which will lead to the well-being and tranquility of all mankind. This span of earth is but one homeland and one habitation. It behooveth you to abandon vainglory, which causes alienation, and to set your hearts on whatever will ensure harmony. In the estimation of the people of Baha, man's glory lieth in his knowledge, his upright conduct, his praiseworthy character, his wisdom, and not in his nationality or rank. O people of the earth, appreciate the value of this heavenly word. Indeed, it may be likened unto a ship for the ocean of knowledge and a shining luminary for the realm of perception. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Cordia. Elizabeth? Elizabeth, are you there?
O my God, verily these servants are turning to thee, supplicating thy kingdom of mercy. Verily they are attracted by thy holiness and set aglow with the fire of thy love, seeking confirmation from thy wondrous kingdom and hoping for attainment in thy heavenly realm. Verily they long for the descent of thy bestowal, desiring illumination from the sun of reality. O Lord, make them radiant lamps, merciful signs, fruitful trees, and shining stars. May they come forth in thy service and be connected with thee by the bounds and ties of thy love, longing for the lights of thy favor. O Lord, make them signs of guidance, standards of thine immortal kingdom, waves of the sea of thy mercy, mirrors of the light of thy majesty. Verily, thou art the generous. Verily, thou art the merciful. Verily, thou art the precious, the beloved. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Barbara Taylor.
O thou loving provider, these souls have hearkened to the summons of the kingdom and have gazed upon the glory of the Sun of Truth. They have risen upward to the refreshing skies of love. They are enamored of thy nature and they worship thy beauty. Unto thee have they turned themselves, speaking together of thee, seeking out thy dwelling, and thirsting for the water brooks of thy heavenly realm. Thou art the giver, the bestower, the ever-loving. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Barbara. Dorothy.
There lay concealed within the holy veil and prepared for the service of God a company.
Yasmin.
Stop sharing your screen, Yasmin.
Okay. There lay concealed within the holy veil and prepared for the service of God a company of his chosen ones who shall be manifested unto men, who shall aid his cause, who shall be afraid of no one, though the entire human race rise up and war against them. These are the ones who, before the gaze of the dwellers on earth and the denizens of heaven, shall arise and shouting aloud, acclaim the name of the Almighty, and summon the children of men to the path of God, the all glorious, the all praised. Walk thou in their way, and let no one dismay thee. Be of them whom the tumults of the world, however much it may agitate them in the path of their Creator, can never sadden, whose purpose the blame of the blamer will never defeat. Go forth with the tablet of God and his signs, and rejoin them that have believed in me, and announce unto them tidings of our most holy paradise. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Dorothy. Cordia.
My object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its peoples. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Through the power of the words he hath uttered, the whole of the human race can be illumined with the light of unity, and the remembrance of his name is able to set on fire the hearts of all men and burn away the veils that intervene between them and his glory. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Claudia. Iraj?
The whole human race is submerged in the sea of the mercy of the Lord, and we are all the sheep of the one divine shepherd. Whatever shortcomings exist among us must be remedied. For example, those who are ignorant must be educated so that they may become wise. The sick must be treated until they recover. Those who are immature must be trained in order to reach maturity. Those asleep must be awakened. All this must be accomplished through love and not through hatred and hostility. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Iraj.
Well,
Elizabeth?
Racism retards the unfoldment of the boundless potentialities of its victims, corrupts its perpetrators, and blights human progress. Recognition of the oneness of mankind implemented by appropriate legal measures must be universally upheld if this problem is to be overcome. Universal House of Justice.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Friends, it's now time for the healing prayer. I'd like to thank all of our volunteers for reading this morning and to Chris for preparing those readings with the beautiful photographic backgrounds. Matthew Taylor will perform the healing prayer. And if any of you wish to remember a loved one through the prayer for healing, please feel free to call out their name at time.
Walter Harper. Christine Goss.
Doris Smith.
Clifton Warnock.
Elon Bowers.
Chelsea Reynolds.
Sally Smith.
Red L. Anglin.
Gifford. Angela.
Shirley Claxton. Gilbert Smith.
Thy name is my healing, oh my God, and remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope, and love for thee is my companion. Thy mercy to me is my healing, and my succor in both this world and the world to come. Thou verily art the all-bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise, the all-knowing, the all-knowing, the all-wise.
Thank you, Matthew. And friends, now Matthew is going to provide some additional music for us this morning. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Okay, I was going to sing Open Thou the Door, but I had one quick request. If we could all mute our microphones, and it's a call and response. So I encourage you to sing, but just when the mics are on, it's like there's feedback and stuff like that, and it kind of messes up the experience. Okay. So, and my mom's gonna sing too. Okay. 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 Ready? Okay. Oh Lord my God, open thou the door. Prepare the means. Make safe the path. And guide our way. For verily thou art the help in peril, the self-subsisting, Ya Baha'u'llah. O Lord my God, open thou the door. Prepare the means. Make safe the path. And guide our way. For verily thou art the help in peril, the self-subsisting, Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Matthew and Barbara. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Maybe you can come back another time and share a little more. Okay, friends, every week we are blessed to have someone, a guest presenter, to come and share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week, we're honored to have again Dr. Iraj Koladous, who has given presentations to this community on various topics. He was born in Iran during World War II. He came to the US when he was 19 to continue his education. His graduate degrees are in accounting, industrial management, and with a doctorate in public administration from the University of Georgia. He was a professor at Clemson University until retirement. While there, he initiated and facilitated a monthly seminar entitled Globalism, where students and faculty from all disciplines were invited to participate in discussions on major global issues and impediments to world peace, which led to continued discussions along Baha'u'llah's vision and mission for a better world. Dr. Koladous has traveled to all continents, his most memorable trip having been to Nigeria for travel teaching in the 1970s, based on a recommendation by Hand of the Cause, Amatul Baha Ruhiyah Khanum. He was a member of Iran's Baha'i Foreign Teaching and Pioneering Committee in the 1960s. His travel teaching trip to Africa was influenced by that committee, as well as by Hand of the Cause Dr. Rahmatullah Muhajir, who frequently visited and advised the committee. In his retirement years, he's had the opportunity and blessing of facilitating a number of Ruhi classes, plus attending and presenting at various area churches and synagogues. Since 2016, he has taught or facilitated courses in several churches such as Prayer Meditation, Life After Death, Introduction to the Baha'i Faith, and Ruhi Book 1. His lovely wife of 50 plus years is Shahnaz, whose grandfather and great-grandfather were martyred in the city of Yazd. They have 2 sons and 3 grandchildren. We're pleased to have him share with us today. So friends, please welcome Iraj, who prefers to be known as Roger, and who will enlighten us with his presentation on From Louis Gregory to Enoch Olenga, Our Distinguished Hands of the Cause of African and African American Descent. Please welcome Roger.
Aloha, dear friends. I'm happy to be here again. I'm particularly happy to be speaking about our 2 African and African American most revered and most loved hands of the cause, Louis George Gregory and Enoch Olenga. You may know that most of the hands of the cause were appointed by Shoghi Effendi. That means 42 out of the 50 hands of the cause were appointed by Shoghi Effendi. And from these 42 hands of the cause, I did not exactly know it until I counted it. 15 are from North America. 13 are from Iran. I always thought Iran would have more hands of the cause. You know, the faith was there with 200,000-300,000 Baha'is, and there were just a few Baha'is in the US. But there are 15 hands of the cause from US, 13 from Iran, and I believe that means how many? So 15 and 13 is 28. That there were 9 from Europe, and then there was 2 from Iraq, not many of us know, and 1 from Egypt, and then 1 from Australia. And who is left? And 1 from Africa. And I don't know if you know it or not, that in the Black Africa, which means most of Africa, there was virtually no Baha'i until 1951, the year that Louis Gregory passed away. So I'm going to tell you about some of these fascinating stories. You know, and so I said the 15 hands of the cause are from North America. And then also another interesting thing, so maybe the Friends of Unity Center would make note and would invite me one more time to speak about the women hands of the cause. We had 8 women hands of the cause. And guess what? All of them were appointed from North America. 1 of them was actually British, but all 8 of them were appointed in North America, primarily in the USA. But today we're going to talk about those precious African and African American hands of the cause. So Louis George Gregory, I have read from so many different sources, so in order for me to keep it within the framework of the time limit that we have, I'll put it down on paper so that I won't deviate from it, so that I won't go on and on. Louis George Gregory was born in 1874 in Charleston, South Carolina, from an African mother. I don't know how many of you know this part of it. And his father was a plantation owner and slaver by the name of George Washington Dargan. So she was African. He was a plantation owner and slaver. His father died when Louis was 4 years old. And she married George Gregory, who served in the Union Army and received medals for his service. Louis attended the first elementary school, which was open. This was for the first elementary school, which was open to white and black children. And then Avery Institute, a private secondary school. As you noted, he also adopted his stepfather's last name. That is George Gregory. Louis then attended Fisk College in Nashville. And he was brilliant. He did very well in college and received his bachelor's degree there in Fisk College in 1896. 1896. So that's 124 years ago. His stepfather, George, paid for his first year of college, and he really loved him and took good care of him. But then he self-supported himself by tailoring clothes and doing odd jobs, plus a lot of scholarships. He was brilliant, he was on top of his class, and he got a lot of scholarships. He then, after receiving his bachelor's degree, he moved to Washington, D.C. and registered at Howard University and got his LLB degree, that's in law, in 1902. He then became quite active on racial issues and became kind of agnostic. And he was considered by some as kind of a radical in terms of his pursuance of racial justice and racial issues. Now, this was, of course, the early time of his life, the first 30 years of his life, was a time where lynching was still going on, and close to 3,000 blacks were lynched in the first 25, 30 years of his life. Many times their properties were attacked or confiscated. And life was quite intolerable for most blacks. Still is in some places, but back then it was something else. At that time, this brilliant, wonderful man, Louis George Gregory, he got a partner in law and practiced law in Washington, D.C. This is 1902 to 1906. And then he got a senior position in the government with the Treasury Department. And it was there that one of his colleagues, I made a note of his name, I forgot his name, Thomas Gibbs, who was not a Baha'i, told him about the Baha'i faith and thought that he could be interested to know more about the Baha'i faith. At that time, we're talking about 1907, so there was a wonderful couple in Washington, D.C. by the name of Pauline and Joseph Hannons, who were Baha'is. And they had weekly firesides at their home. And Loa Getzinger, the early famous Baha'i that most of you have heard of her, was most often the guest speaker. So at that time, Louis became very interested and decided to attend these firesides on a regular basis, on a weekly basis. So that is a lot of weeks. So he attended for almost a year and a half, regularly attending, making notes, reading the writings, and then I made a note of the date. Then Louis George Gregory declared his faith in Baha'u'llah on July 23rd, 1909. And immediately started organizing Baha'i meetings and wrote to Abu Baha confirming this was the practice at the time, that those who declared themselves would write a letter to Abdul Baha, confirming his faith. And Abdul Baha would respond to everyone who would declare. So Abdul Baha responded to him with love and his high expectations for improvement of racial relations in America. I want to read part of the passage from Abdul Baha, the letter that he wrote to him upon his declaration. I hope that you may become the means whereby the white and colored people shall close their eyes to racial differences and behold the reality of humanity. And that is the universal unity, which is the oneness of the kingdom of the human race, the basic harmony of the world, and the appearance of the bounty of the Almighty. Rely as much as thou can upon the true one, and be thou resigned to the will of God, so that like unto a candle, thou mayest be enkindled in the world of humanity, and like unto a star, thou mayest shine and gleam from the horizon of reality and become the cause of the guidance of both races. The letter was much longer, but this was the gist of it. Beautiful letter, wasn't it? That Abdul Baha wrote in confirmation of this beautiful man becoming Baha'i. So from that point on, Lewis, he always wrote, he intensified his writings, his lectures, and travels, and he started traveling to several states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, teaching the faith enthusiastically. Now, there's something that also read in some of these passages. There were probably about 1,500 Baha'is in the US in 1909, 1910. And they were all coming from different backgrounds, Baptist and Methodist and this group and that group. And so, and average Americans who lived that kind of life, so it was difficult or too new for them and unfamiliar for them to understand what the faith and what Abdul Baha was talking about. So at the time, I read, surprisingly, that there seemed to be three groups of Baha'is from this 1,500. One group said that this is the moray of the time, the moray of the USA, the practice of USA, and we cannot just go ahead and mix. So we just need to leave it alone. We teach the faith, but we have our group and the blacks can have their groups. There were one group who said that, well, it depends on the situation. Sometimes we can have mixed meetings and sometimes we not need to have mixed meeting. And there was, of course, the third group, including, of course, George Gregory, and that said that, no, it's time to completely integrate. This is the teaching of our time. This is the mandate of Abdul Baha, and that's what we need to do. So now, at that time, Lewis was then elected to the Washington Assembly. A group had formed a working group for race relations, and they put Lewis Gregory as part of that group. But something kind of amazing also happened in 1911. I haven't read in the story of other Hands of the Cause or other prominent Baha'is of course, he was not Hands of the Cause back then either, of somebody being invited to come to Haifa, some of the Baha'is. In 1911, Abdul Baha invited Lewis Gregory to come to Haifa and visit with him. This was about a year before Abdul Baha was totally released and totally allowed to come out of that area and out of Egypt and start traveling to Europe and to the US and Canada. But Abdul Baha was anxious to meet Louis Gregory and be with him and sit with him. So Abdul Baha invited him and he went to Haifa in 1911. And then when he got there, Abdul Baha showered him with love and praise. And then at that time, there was also another pilgrim. There were a number of pilgrims who had come from various countries, but then there was another pilgrim, a young woman, a young lady that some of you may heard about. Her name was Louisa Matthew. And so they got to know each other. And Abdul Baha, most of his talks during the time that Louis Gregory was there was about the importance of racial harmony, the importance of what it means, what unity of mankind and unity of the oneness of the human race really means in this faith. And he encouraged that discussion very much among the pilgrims at that time. Now this Louisa, this young lady, she had also declared her faith in Baha'u'llah through some of the early Baha'is, not in England, she was from England, but in Paris, through the efforts of some of the early believers. So to make the story a little shorter, because we don't have enough time, this was done 1912, and Abdul Baha was coming to the US. And it happens, I don't know how it happens. I don't know whether Abdul Baha had arranged it for this Louisa to be on the same ship coming to US and all that, but Louisa, that lady from England, who met Louis Gregory also in Haifa in 1911, was on the same ship, and Abdul Baha started talking more frankly and alluded to the importance of leading the way and interracial marriage in order to prove that this is really oneness of humanity and oneness of race. That's also part of it. And then alluded to their meeting, and then and encouraged her to visit Louis Gregory when they get to US and take it from there and see if they're compatible with each other and marry him. So this also happened then on the way to Europe, on the way from Europe to US. Now, when Abdul Baha came to US, Louis Gregory went and visited him in New York and got to know Louisa as well. And the discussion continued. And then Abdul Baha went to different cities and spoke. And of course, he went to Washington, D.C. as well. And then spent a lot of time again with Louis Gregory. And Louis Gregory was instrumental in inviting him for speaking at Howard University, where he graduated from. And at one of what was the name of that famous church, a black church in AME church, for Abdul Baha to speak, that he spoke. One other interesting thing happened in Washington, D.C. that I need to share with you, that many of you probably know about, is that Ali Gholi Khan, the charge d'affaires that didn't have an ambassador for Iran, and he was apparently Baha'i from what I understand, was basically the liaison between the Iranian government and US, invited Abdul Baha to come to his house, and he invited a number of congressmen and important people of the time in Washington, D.C. And Abdul Baha, of course, invited Louis Gregory to that for that invitation. And they had a social, they talked, and lunchtime came, and Louis Gregory started leaving, and he left the room. And so all of a sudden, Abdul Baha turned around, where's Louis? Where's Louis? Where's Louis? And so this was the moray of the time blacks and whites would not sit at the table, and particularly these congressmen, important people, even though Louis Gregory was an important person himself in terms of his accomplishments. So he was on his way out, and Abdu'l-Haq was looking for him, and they brought him back. And so Abdu'l-Haq took another chair, put it right beside himself, put a table setting for himself, and says, Louis Gregory sits here, right next to him. And so even these congressmen, this guest of honor, Abdu'l-Haq, could not say anything. And so he sat right next to Abdu'l-Haq. And then, as if nothing happened, as they were having lunch, and beyond that, for the whole hour, Abdu'l-Haq talked about what? About oneness of the humankind, oneness of the human race, and then patting on Louis Gregory and showing his love and affection for Louis Gregory. That's beautiful, isn't it? And then on September 27th, 1912, Louis George Gregory and Louisa Matthew got married in Washington, D.C. And then, of course, overly excited, Louis Gregory started traveling as if this is the end of the world. And it is the end of the world. And he traveled to most of the states, most of the southern states, I believe 14 out of 16 at that time, and started teaching from right to left. And some of the people who traveled with him off and on indicate the fact that there was probably no other teacher so effective, particularly for the African Americans, black race in the USA before Louis Gregory. And he brought hundreds of people to the faith, hundreds of devoted servants of Baha'u'llah to the faith, in teaching the faith, including the most vital issue of the time, which is still the most vital issue of the time, which is racial harmony and racial unity. We are on that path, but Louis Gregory learned to modify his tactics, not be radical anymore, but teach, and teach even our enemies when appropriate, when the time comes, and taking them out of their misery. They think they're okay, but out of their misery, and bring them from darkness to light. So this is what he did for year after year. And then in 1922, Louis Gregory was elected as a member of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of USA. And for the next 16 active years of his life, that is 1922 to 1946, when he was having health issues and he retired, he was 12 years of out of those years, he was reelected as member of the National Spiritual Assembly. But the sad part of the story was that, from what I read, that 27 out of the 50 states or so, black and whites were not even allowed to walk together, ride on the train together, let alone being married. So they had a hard time. They could not travel together. They could not be together for most of the time. And Louis Gregory was assigned, he saw it as his mission to spend all of his time in teaching the Baha'i faith and traveling and talking about oneness of the humankind and the importance of harmony among races. So what did Louisa did? Some people said that probably their marriage is not working, but their marriage was working very well to the end of their lives. But Louisa decided to go travel teaching on her own, and most of the time she went travel teaching to Europe and stayed for months and months in Europe, and they were in correspondence all the time, and they came back and forth. And sometime in 1930s, I think 1936, they found there was a teaching plan from Shoghi Effendi, and Haiti was also part of it, and they pioneered to Haiti. But after a few months, they expelled them from Haiti. They said, you cannot be here. I don't know whether it was the question of race again, and the mixed race or whatever it was, they had to come back. So they came back. So, and then from the time that Louis Gregory was a member of the National Assembly, he started traveling more widely throughout the USA, basically educating Baha'is and non-Baha'is. Baha'is needed to be educated too. So this was his double mission that he performed so marvelously and so beautifully. So in 1946, his health was deteriorating, and he moved to an area close to Greenacre in Maine, and his wife also came, and they lived together for the rest of his life, and he passed away on July 30th, 1951. His wife, who was a little older than him, lived another few years, but then at that time, she moved to New York to live with the family, and she passed away in 1956. So this was their lives, but a life with a lot of achievements, a lot of faith, and a lot of accomplishments that we still need to continue, be on that path that Louis Gregory was. And Abdu'l-Baha was so proud of him for what he did and what he accomplished. Let me just share another passage from Abdu'l-Baha with regard to the accomplishments of Louis Gregory and some statements in general. He says, Abdu'l-Baha says, as both races are under the protection of the all-knowing God, therefore the lamps of unity must be lighted in such a manner in these meetings that no distinction be perceived between the white and the colored. Colors are phenomenal, but the realities of men are essence. When there exists unity of the essence, what power has the phenomenal? When the light of reality is shining, what power has the darkness of the unreal? If it be possible, gather together these two races, black and white, into one assembly, and put such love into their hearts that they shall not only unite, but even intermarry. Be sure that the result of this will abolish differences and disputes between black and white. Moreover, by the will of God, may it be so. This is a great service to the world of humanity. So this was another tablet of confirmation of what our beloved Louis Gregory was doing. My time is short. Herman, how many more minutes do I have?
15.
What?
15 minutes.
Oh, 50, oh, wonderful. So I can spend a few more minutes.
Yes.
I hope you guys are not getting tired. But I want to spend a few more minutes now on our second hand of the cause.
Yes, thank you.
Anik Olinga from Africa. 1951, he passed away. And so I don't know whether Shoghi Effendi was planning this. He was planning this before his passing. But right around that time, in 1951, when I said there was not even one African Baha'i in 1951. We had about 200,000 Baha'is across the globe. As you probably know, 90% of them were from Iran, and 10% were from Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Europe, USA, Canada, and the other 10% from this roughly 200,000 Baha'is in 1951. And Shoghi Effendi, who loved Africa, who loved Black people, who had traveled with Ruya Khanum from north to south and from south to north 2 times. I mean, planning for years and years, said it is not time. And he made it first, I guess he was testing the waters. He made it the mission of the British Baha'is, because there were so many British, what do you call it, places where our domination of Britain. The British Baha'is to go pioneering to Africa and start teaching. Then after a couple of months or even shorter time, he asked the National Assembly of Baha'is of USA to join in and send pioneers to Africa. And after a month or so, and then he said the Baha'is of Iran to come. So if he came from all these different places, but a few in particular came from Iran at that time, including one that I'll talk about him some other time, Hassan Balyuzi, who also became a hand of the cause, who went with his family, including his son-in-law, Mr. Naqshbandi, and his daughter, Violette, who became a companion of Ruhi Khanum for many, many years. They went pioneer to Africa. Immediate obedience. This was the soonest they received the message that the Baha'is of Iran should also join in, they went to Africa. We're talking about 1951, not even one Baha'i in Africa. They toiled and toiled, they worked and worked. They had fireside here and there. And then they had 2 Baha'is, 2 people from Uganda, from across Nairobi. They declared, okay? So then in February, make a note, in February of 1952, Mr. Banani and his wife went on pilgrimage. And then while they were on pilgrimage, and Mr. Naqshbandi was still in Kampala, near in Uganda, having his firesides, with the help of a couple of other British pioneers, asked Mr. Banani to request Shoghi Effendi to please go to the shrine of the Baba and Baha'u'llah together with Mr. Banani and pray for the success of the teaching efforts in the shrines. And that's what Shoghi Effendi did. And that day, that night, there was a fellow that I'd come to know for a few months. He came to that fireside. His name was Anik Olinga. And Anik Olinga saw the beauty in this faith of God and stayed a number of hours asking questions, wanting to make sure he was from a Christian background. And asked a number of questions. And then it was getting late and says, okay, I'll have to leave and I'll be back. But he couldn't wait until the next day. Late that night, he knocked at the door again and asked his final question, how can I become a Baha'i? And he declared. It was in February 1952. And he, like Louis Gregory, started teaching as if there is no tomorrow. And there is no tomorrow. He went to his tribe first. A number of them became Baha'is. He went to different parts of Nairobi and Uganda, different peoples became Baha'i. Within a short period of time, 200 people had declared. And brought joy, absolute joy to Shoghi Effendi and to the Baha'i world. And Shoghi Effendi told them that this is the beginning, because Africa would open up to this faith of God and would save the rest of the world from their complacency. For years and years, they had attempted, they had tried. There were 2 or 3 Baha'is here, 2 or 3 Baha'is there, 2 or 3 Baha'is in that city, in that city. But within a few months, there were 200 Baha'is. Let me see, I can find the passage from Shoghi Effendi. If I can't find it, I will have to share some other time. Oh, here it is. It says, the manner in which the faith has spread in Africa is truly remarkable and overshadows the manner it has spread in other parts of the world. It indicates how glorious will be the future of the faith in that great continent. And with that, Mr. Naqshbandi, Mr. Olenga, and a couple of other people who had declared the faith, and together with Vilayat Naqshbandi, Mr. Naqshbandi's wife. You know, Mr. Naqshbandi also became a member of Universal Justice for years and years until he passed away a few years ago. They said that we got to do something. Okay, Nairobi in Uganda is fine, and we have hundreds of Baha'is now. So they got on the Jeep and started going from East Africa, that they were traveling to West to see what they should do. And they dropped off one of these wonderful new Baha'is who became the pioneer in one of these countries. And they dropped off the second one, the second country, and they were on their way to Cameroon, where was to be the place where Eunuch Olenga needed to be offloaded and for them to come back. But sometimes the plan don't work exactly as we want it to be, and they got stuck. And of course, think about the roads in Africa and roads back then, going from east to west. They got stuck in mud and rain, and the Jeep, they could not move. The closest place where they could find a place was apparently 40, 50 kilometers, maybe about 30, 40 miles away. And Eunuch Olenga said that I'll walk and find a repair person to come and help us get out of this place and for us to continue our journey. So he walked about 30 miles and he passed out in the desert. And Mr. and Mrs. Naqshbandi did their best and after a few hours got this car moving again, and they found him along the way. And they kept on traveling until they reached Cameroon, and they dropped him off. And within days, of course, with Eunuch Olenga, there were new Baha'is, and there were new Baha'is, and there were new Baha'is. And he became the Knight of Baha'u'llah, according to Shoghi Effendi. Any place that anyone conquered was and established the faith was the Knight of Baha'u'llah. He was the Knight of Baha'u'llah then for Cameroon. And then, of course, then he would find Baha'is, he would deepen them. I would send them to Togo, to Liberia, to this country, to Nigeria, to this country, that country. And within months, we had tens of Knights of Baha'u'llah. So Shoghi Effendi called him what? Called him Abul Futu. Means the father of the conquerors, the father of all these knights. It was Eunuch Olenga. Okay, my time is coming to an end. So So then he became a member of National Assembly, became chair of the National Assembly of that whole region. There were tens of assemblies that they had, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of Baha'is who came to the faith because of mainly Onikalinga. And 1957, February 1957, it was time for him to go on pilgrimage and see Shoghi Effendi, who loved him so much, who talked about him so much, who had sent him so many letters, to visit him face to face. And he went to Haifa on pilgrimage, and he visited Shoghi Effendi. And they went to the shrines, and this was the best of his time. And he was reinvigorated when he came back. Then, of course, in October of 1957, the news came that Shoghi Effendi had passed away. But that could be right before his passing away, of course. That's the most important story. In October of 1957, he, together with a number of others, were appointed as the newest hands of the cause. And he was not only the newest, but the youngest hand of the cause. He was 31 years old when in 1957, the youngest hand of the cause was Onikalinga from Uganda. This brilliant man. And then he attended, I had the pleasure and the opportunity of meeting Onikalinga 3 times. 1958 in the conference in Frankfurt that he attended, and he was one of the people on the stage. 1968, the conference in Sicily, where he also attended and spoke. And then 1968 again, when we all went to Haifa, and most of the hand of the cause were there, including Onikalinga. And then he started traveling all across the globe, teaching the faith so brilliantly from South America, Central America, briefly in North America, all across Europe, Australia, India, Japan. He taught until the end of his life. But then it is a sad story, but he's now in paradise. So there's nothing sad about it. But then this was turmoil in Uganda, and he had returned to Uganda to protect the house of worship in Kampala. He bought a house near house of worship, and he lived there. And it was still turmoil in Uganda, and he, together with his wife and 3 of his children, were killed in his own home. God bless his soul. God has blessed his soul, and the blessed of Louis Gregory. And thank you very much for letting me share these stories with you. Allah Akbar.
Allahu Akbar. Thank you so much for this loving and informative presentation on our beloved Hands of the Cause of God, Louis G. Gregory and Onikalinga. We are so appreciative of this wonderful blessing. So many details and things some of us know, but others that we are, may have been unaware of. So we appreciate that so much. Thank you.
We are so blessed, and we have to walk on the path and learn from the stories every day. And so I'll be so happy for the friends to share their thoughts.
Yes. Anybody wishing to ask questions or comments, or however you are moved, please feel free to do so now.
While they're thinking, go ahead.
Hi, Raj. It's Mike. I just want to, just so inspiring and so grateful for your sharing, and you have impacted me profoundly in the sharing of this history and stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Michael. I also wanted to say that 1988, I believe, one of the Baha'is in South Carolina. Of course, South Carolina, Baha'is also, the Baha'i movement in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, started with Louis Gregory. They purchased his home. It was actually the home of his father, his stepfather, which was built in 1880. They bought the house in 1988, 108 years after, which is also a place which belongs to Baha'is. His degrees, some of his artifacts are there, and the stories of Louis Gregory. So if you pass by Charleston, you have to go and find that house and visit that place.
Anyone else?
Yes, I'd like to say something. Allah Bha'i Raj, this is Dorothy, and I'd just like to say thank you so much. I always enjoy your talks because they're always so educational and inspiring. So thank you for sharing the stories with us. And also, I happened to have been in Charleston, I think it was last year or year before last. I think it was last year. And I did visit the house there where they did purchase where Louis Gregory's father was. But it was really inspiring. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to hearing the other half of it, of your stories about our female hands of the cause. But thank you so much. As always, I love hearing your stories.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. We miss you.
Any more comments, thoughts? I had a thought, Roger. Does the House of Justice consider Egypt as strictly Arab, since it's on one part of it is on the northeast corner of Africa and the other part is the southwest corner of Asia? I know Egypt itself considers itself an Arab republic.
Yeah, of course, Egypt is part of Africa.
Arab only?
Is part of Africa, and it was conquered by Arabs in the early history of Islam, and they became Muslims, and the language is Arabic, and so the language is Arabic. They're Egyptians. They consider themselves Egyptians, and of course the faith also started growing in Egypt from the time of Abdul Baha and beyond.
Thank you.
Mrs. Bowers wants to say something.
Pardon?
Mrs. Bowers wants to say something.
Yes, thank you so much.
Please.
I just took note of when you were speaking of the marriage between Louis Gregory and Louisa at a time when that was actually illegal in the United States. How did they get around that?
Well, it was
law to allow themselves to be married.
From what I understand, it was illegal in 27 states. They were silent in the other states. And from what I understand, they married in Washington, D.C., and apparently it was not illegal as such in there. And also now they mentioned Louisa in her own rights was also a very active and very devoted Baha'i and very successful in teaching. I also wanted to mention that apparently they called her Louis, but they didn't want to call both of them Louis, and so they called her Louisa, particularly when we talk about both of them together. But this is also that part of it.
Thank you for this talk.
Yes, thank you. And it was very difficult for them, but they loved each other and they stayed together to the end of their lives.
Yeah, it must have, the traveling and so many things must have been just unbearable because of all the prejudice.
Yes, very much.
But
and
it also shows us that the prejudice actually affected both black and white adversely. Because whites were not free. If they fell in love with a black, they couldn't marry that black, or their children could not, join in schools together or do anything together. So
Exactly.
everybody suffered.
Yes. And of course, this suffering still continues in many ways
Oh, yeah.
by thousands upon thousands of people who are prejudiced, superstitious, fanatic, and short-sighted.
It's
And so,
dividing our
and
country.
as we all know, as Baha'is, our task is much harder than just going to the street and demonstrate. We may go to the street when appropriate, when it is not hostility and all that, and say a few nice words. But our task is long-term and more important in terms that we are going to create not only total reconciliation, but from what I read, I didn't talk about that too clearly, perhaps. He wants many, many intermarriages until at one point we don't say blacks and whites and red and yellow. It's all it's human race. We have come from different places, and we're all humans. And this marriage, Abdu'l-Baha thought that would ultimately bring the clear unity. That stop this question of I'm black race, I'm white race, I'm this, I'm that. We're all the human race.
Exactly.
So this is the legacy from the time of Louis Gregory. Of course, I should have mentioned also from the time of, what was his name, Robert who? Robert
Turner.
Robert Turner was the first African-American Baha'i who became Baha'i in 1898. He was the butler for a wealthy Baha'i for a wealthy person who became Baha'i, and then he was hearing about all that discussion and he became Baha'i. But later on, that lady was not active anymore, but he was active to the end of his life. And he, together with his boss, went on pilgrimage in 1898, 1899. So he was really the first African-American Baha'i that we should also remember. Thank you.
What was the year of Enoch Alinga and his family's martyrdom?
1979, the same year of Iran's revolution. And so let me see, he was, as you said, he was only 31 years old when he became hand of the cause. So he was born in 1926. So he was then 53 years old at the time of his martyrdom. He was really martyred. They did not, he is not counted as such as martyr, but in many ways it was because he was protecting the house of worship and he wanted to be, to still serve the faith, that he went back to Uganda.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other thoughts or comments? Anyone?
If there's no other comment, let me just mention that, as you know, there are many, if you go on YouTube, on Wikipedia, on Bahaipedia, they call it, there are things written about them. But I hope that many of you who have not you still don't have this book, Lights of Fortitude, is this short story of 10, 15 pages of each one of these 50 hands of the cause. And each one of them is so many lessons that we learn from. And every time that I really read them and reflect on them, it brings tears to my eyes. As we've had these amazing people among us, and we all have the capacity to walk in their path, to walk in the path of Abdu'l-Baha, and to walk in the path of his real servants. Any final thoughts?
Well, thank you, friends. Great questions for those of you who had questions and made comments. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to welcome all of our guests to the Baha'i Unity Center, the devotional program this morning. Feel free to share who you are, where you're from, how you happen to be with us, regardless of how many times you may have come and visited. This includes Baha'is who are visiting from out of town and any sojourners recently returned to the area. We'd love to hear from you.
Good morning, friends. I'm Connie Morgan. I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I thought the presentation by Dr. Doss was quite informative and enlightening. And I do like to share here in our community, and especially during the short time that we consider African American History Month, things of this nature. And I've shared quite a bit about Louis Gregory and Olinga and Baha'is here in Savannah. And thank you again. This is my third time. I have enjoyed each time I've been here.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your presence and for sharing that. Thank you. Any other guests joining us this morning?
Good morning. This is Taki Morgan, Connie's daughter, here and visiting with you this morning. And once again, it's just been a pleasure listening to your presenters and just enjoying the atmosphere. I love the music and I did participate with the call and response at the beginning. But thank you so much for that wealth of history and knowledge that was shared on this morning. It's a treasure to have that in the Baha'i community. It's so young, so I appreciate hearing stories from those that have lived the experience. Thank you so much.
You're more than.
Thank you.
Thank you. Loved having you with us this morning. Friends, any other guests present that would like to share a little bit?
This is Micah. Janice, Annie and I don't consider ourselves technically guests in South DeKalb, but I guess since we're not there in body, we need to introduce ourselves as guests from Athens, Georgia.
Welcome. Welcome. We appreciate you both so much. Thank you for joining us. Anyone else?
Pleasure.
Any other guests this morning who would like to share?
Hi, this is Donna Simmons, and I'm an alumni of South DeKalb, so it feels like home. I don't get to interact much. I have a 2-year-old that lives with me, so I never know what's going to happen with her. But I must say that listening to some of the early history with Mr. Olinga compared to what we see in this country that we live in, put some things in some very interesting perspective. You know, looking at the openness and warmth of the hearts over there that he was able to ignite versus some of the experiences that we're seeing here. It's, yeah, this year has been a year of a lot of discovery for me. And this really puts perspective on it. I appreciate that.
We appreciate your comments for sure.
Thank you. And let me also mention that, as I said, in 1951, there was not even one Baha'i in all African continent, the Black African continent. And now we have almost 1 million Baha'is.
Well, you know, I was watching at one point that, and I know I'm not going to get it right, when they were talking about the different clusters around the world. And there was that cluster, I don't remember what country it was in Africa, where they had divided their cluster like 4 times because there were so many people. And, you know, here I feel like I'm living in a desert because there are 3 of us in our community all together. And so if I had not seen it on video, there's no way that I ever could have imagined it. But here again, looking at what's been going on here now, and we see these hearts, they're like hearts of rock compared to, the hearts of kindling where the flame got united. And then the other thing, and I'll just go out there and date myself, when you say 1951, that was the year I was born. So it makes, yeah, I know. I remember I saw your birthday post, Hermione. So we have that in common. And, that made a big impression on me too. So.
Wonderful.
Taras, unmute yourself. Unmute. Let me see if I can unmute you. Okay, now I've unmuted you.
Yes, I wanted to just say good morning to Iraj and the rest of the friends. And I'm really amazed at the extent of knowledge that Dr. Iraj Khodadus has. And by the way, historically in 1953-54, when my father was me and my brother, sister went pioneering, it was Iraj's father, Mr. Khodadus, who was on the pioneer committee, and my father was telling how Mr. Furutant sent him to Mr. Khodadus, Iraj's father, and it seems Iraj continued in his father's footsteps. And again, amazing, and I love him, and it's just amazing. I think for me, from Persian background, Iraj sets a real good example, and amazing. Thank you.
It's good to see you again, Tarajan, but thank you for all these compliments, but I'm really nothing and I'm worth nothing. And of course, as we know, the last valley that Al-Baha talks about is the valley of nothingness. The soonest, and this also an advice, of course, I'm really nothing, but that's an advice from Al-Baha to all of us. The soonest we think we're something, that probably becomes the end for many people who don't have the capacity. So God, give us capacity and understand that we are all your servants, and abide by your bidding and walk in your path the best we can. It's good to see you, Tarajan.
Thank you.
Friends, anyone else before we make a couple of announcements? Elizabeth?
I just wanted to say that the Unity Center was my home, but I've been away for 17 years. I now live in Ackworth, which is a community without too many Baha'is in it. There are few of us, but this gives me life again to be able to participate in services at the Unity Center. It's just like Haagen-Dazs ice cream to me. I really appreciate it so much, and I appreciate all the work that you are doing to bring this to us, Hermione. Your effort is tremendously appreciated. And I'm so grateful for today's talk by Roger, who, by the way, he's so modest. He has many talks on YouTube, which are just wonderful, and they cover so many different subjects, so that if you ever decide you need a Baha'i shot in the arm, go to YouTube and listen to him. And thanks again, everyone.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let me also mention, Elizabeth, I have a Ruhi class with the Baha'is of Ackworth. They are primarily, from what I've seen, those who come are Persian Baha'is.
But that part of Ackworth is the incorporated part. I live in unincorporated, so I'm not a part of that community.
Okay, but what I want to say in general, and it could apply to you too, and particularly these 100% Persians, 100% white communities need people like you, so that they also learn this idea of integration is not just a talk. We need to do it, we need to practice it, and we need to apply it for everything we say, for everything we do. And so people of color in those places where they're all Persians, they're all whites, are very much needed.
Well,
the participation is very much needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna.
I wonder, do we have any centralized lists, like a repository which says, these are Zoom meetings which are available like in the area. For instance, I've started attending the Zoom feast for the city of Atlanta. And, so Roger, you're mentioning some study circles that are on Zoom. And, so with this 2-year-old here, I don't know what kind of ongoing commitments I can have, but if there is a centralized list or if we can develop one, it could be good for us, to not feel isolated and to be able to interact with more of the communities, more of the friends.
I know that the Secretary of Assemblies, particularly if they are on area teaching committee, and our secretary is, or she was secretary, she's now on the area teaching committee, Deborah Pesta, that some of you may know, she sends regularly all these announcements to the region, ours is Cherokee County and this north area, and then Cobb County has another group. So it is like that, and I'm sure regional council could probably have a integrated list.
Yeah, if they could integrate, it'd be great, because let's say before this year, let's say you were looking at the regional constraints as far as who could travel or whatever.
Right.
But now that we're mostly on Zoom, it doesn't matter. We can interact with anybody now.
I'll mention it to one of our regional council members or auxiliary board members.
Yeah. So, we have a group, it's just 3 of us. So let's see. Well, I know Ronnie and Joel.
Yes.
Smith. I believe she's the secretary still for our group. So if it could go to the groups, then it would be great.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, friends, if there are no more comments, we have just a couple of quick announcements. Our next week's speaker will be Ms. Adelia Bahia Aroja, followed the week after by Dr. Greg Watson on January 10th. So please be sure to stop in for additional outstanding presentations planned. And you should get some details about next week's sometime a little bit later this week. And please do remember the food distribution program every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and at the Baha'i Unity Center in the parking lot. Please do spread the word to help combat food insecurity within the community. And for members of the Baha'i faith, you're warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund and the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system. You can just go to ocs.bahai.us. Many thanks then to all who worked together to make today's program possible. And thanks to all of you for sharing your day with us. Until next time, please stay safe and well. We will end now with the closing prayer for the departed. Would anyone like to read it? And this is for any of our loved ones who's passed away recently or not so recently, or just remembering people who have lost their lives. whether it was natural causes or anything else. We just like to remember them with this prayer for the departed.
I will read it. Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. Abase not him whom thou hast exalted through the power of thine everlasting sovereignty, and remove not far from thee him whom thou hast caused to enter the tabernacle of thine eternity. Wilt thou cast away, O my God, him whom thou hast overshadowed with thy lordship, and wilt thou turn away from thee, O my desire, him to whom thou hast been a refuge? Canst thou degrade him whom thou hast uplifted, or forget him whom thou didst enable to remember thee? Glorified, immensely glorified art thou. Thou art he whom from everlasting hath been the king of the entire creation and its prime mover. And thou wilt to everlasting remain the Lord of all created things and their ordainer. Glorified art thou, O my God. If thou cease to be merciful upon thy servants, unto thy servants, who then will show mercy unto them? And if thou refusest to succor thy loved ones, who is there that can succor them? Glorified, immeasurably glorified art thou. Thou art adored in thy truth, and thee do we all verily worship. And thou art manifest in thy justice, and to thee do we all verily bear witness. Thou art in truth beloved in thy grace. No God is there but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Baha'u'llah. Ya Baha'u'llah.
Thank you for reading, Dorothy. And thank you, Chris, for preparing that. Well, friends, it's good to have you with us today, and hopefully we'll see you all next week.